In this video, you'll get and set the title for a group layer in a web map in ArcGIS Online using the ArcGIS API for Python. Open up the group layer title.py script from the GroupLayers folder. We are going to use the map object and the content property, which is a map content object, and use the layers property for our map content object. This layers property, as we have seen previous in this course, returns a list of layers in the web map, but it returns them as objects, feature layer objects and group layer objects. These are the objects that sit outside of our web map and are referenced in as the layers. We're going to grab the group layer in our web map, which will return a group layer object, and we can access the title property to get and set the name of our group layer in our web map. Let's head over to documentation for this title property. Here we have the title property for our group layer object, and we can get and set the title of the group layer. This documentation probably should be expanded on. It doesn't actually set the title until you update the map object. Let's go from here to ArcGIS Online. Here we have the current state of our web map. We have our NPWS group layer. If I expand that, we have 4 layers in that group layer. Let's head back over to PyScripter and look at getting our title value for our group layer and also setting it to rename it a different name. We first access ArcGIS Online. We then use the content manager get method and supply in the web map item ID, which I'll paste now from my notepad. The get method returns an item object that will assign to a variable called web map item. We'll then use that web map item to create our map object, which will assign to a variable called web map. We're going to use the map object content property and print the layers list to screen. We saw in our web map that our NPWS group layer was the second in the list. That is counting from the bottom. So we had our county boundaries layer first, then our NPWS group layer, and then our NIAH layer stood on top. So we know in this layers list that it is the second index, which is 1. And we're going to assign that to a variable called GL for group layer. Now we want to print the group layer title property to screen. So we can simply call the print function our group layer object and the title property, and we can run our script. The reason I am printing the layers to screen is just to show you that they are returned as objects. We're going to see feature layer objects and a group layer object returned in our list. This differs from the web map JSON definition, where you can access those layers as a dictionary. Our script is complete. We can see we were returned a list that has 3 entries. It has 2 feature layers and 1 group layer. And then we also printed the group layer title, which is NPWS group layer from our web map. Now you may not know what index your group layer is at, so let's take a look at another example for getting the title. Here we are iterating over each layer in that layers list. So for each layer in our map.content.layers, if the object returned, which here is the layer, has an underscore layer property, so we're using the has attr Python function, the group layer does have this attribute, whereas a feature layer does not. So if it has the underscore layer property, we're going to use that underscore layer property and say if our layer dot underscore layer dot layer type is a group layer, then print the layer title. You would have seen this underscore layer property in the previous video when we took a look at the group layer object and used the dir Python function to print the list of properties and methods available. Let's run our script. Our script is complete and we can see that the NPWS group layer was printed to screen once more. Next up, we are going to set our group layer title. Once more, we are going to use the map object content property and the layers property for the map content object. And we know that in our layers, our group layer sits at index 1, and we'll assign that group layer object to a variable called GL for group layer. We then want to access the group layer title property and set that equal to npws designated boundaries and not group layer because that's the current name. Because we are accessing and updating a property of the web map using the map object, we need to call the map object update method to commit the change. Let's run our script. Our script is complete. Let's head over to ArcGIS Online and check out the result. Here we can see we have our NPWS group layer. When we refresh, we should see that renamed. So I'll refresh now. And we can see our group layer is now named NPWS designated boundaries. In this lesson, we saw how we could use the ArcGIS API for Python to get and set the title for a group layer in our web map.